Hello, and welcome to the TestRail 7.1 What's New webinar. So this webinar will cover what is new in our latest release of TestRail 7.1. So we have a few things that have changed and a few things that haven't changed. So primarily, what hasn't changed, this release is focused on attachments for TestRail. So we haven't changed the drag and drop of files into test cases and results, so you can still copy and paste your files into your test entities inside TestRail. And the links to attachments are still available as well. However, we have changed a lot of the user interface for attachments within TestRail. So we've added a media library for adding files to test cases results. Test runs, anywhere where you can add an attachment, we've changed the interface for that. We've also implemented the ability to manage individual files that are in your TestRail instance. And we also added a files library for TestRail administrators to be able to see all files associated with the instance. We've made improvements for reusable attachments. We've also added thumbnails for images and icons for file types which can't have a thumbnail. So text files, things like that should have an icon in place as well. We've changed the way attachment IDs are shown in TestRail. We've changed this from just a basic integer to a string. This shouldn't really affect much of anyone's use inside TestRail, but that change has been made as well. And we've also made a few minor API changes, primarily fixes to a couple of issues around a couple of attachment endpoints. So first, we'll take a look at the media library that's available within projects. So when you add new files or when you open the media library, you have the option to add new files, add files to your current TestRail entity. So if you're looking at a test case, you have the option to choose files to include in a text field or add to the entity. So you can select attachments to associate with the test case or also embed them in some text fields. So the images will have a thumbnail. Non-images will have icons, as I mentioned just a moment ago. The media library provides you the option to view files in the current project. With here, as I said, you can select one or more existing files to attach to your test case result, as long as those files are available within the current project. So if you are in a separate project and a file is not available, if you're, say, in project A and there's a file in project B, you would not see those files from project B. And there are additional options to make that file available in multiple projects, which we'll get into in a moment. You can also search through this media library for existing files. So you can find a file by a file name. If you already know the file name, it allows you a quick search, so you do not need to re-upload the files over and over again as you used to have to in TestRail. Going forward, you can now reuse the same file over and over again without needing to do any additional uploads. We've added sorting options to this interface, so you can sort through your attachments by date, name, or size of the file. We also added filters available for the date the file was added, the file type, the user who added it, and also what the attachment is associated with. And this media library also gives you the option to delete files from your TestRail instance as well. So with all those features listed out here, let's take a look at what this actually looks like here. So when you open the attachment interface from various places inside TestRail, generally through the where the attachment interface used to be has just been revamped with a new look. Opening this attachment interface will provide you with the media library for your project. So here we just have a few images that are shown that are associated with this project, where I can select an existing file or add a new file or even delete a file if I need to. If you're inside a text field, I've highlighted the image icon. So now the image icon for text fields also supports other file types. So previously, you could only add an image to a text field. You can now actually embed a text file report, or other item inside a text field through the media library. Just so pressing the image icon will open the same media library, and the item you select will be added to that field from where you open the dialog. If you're in fast track edit mode of a test case, the image library is down at the bottom of the test case. So the image, previously this wasn't even available when viewing a test case in fast track edit mode or editing a test case. Now the image library is available at the bottom with the associated icons, and the same library once again would be used for all of these areas. So there are multiple ways to open up this media library, but the interface within each project will be the same with your necessary attachments. So now if you are managing if you open up your media library and you click on an individual file, you will be provided with a dialog to manage that individual file. You can also open this dialog by clicking on any attachment inside your TestRail instance. So if there's an icon in a test case or a result, if you click on that, you will be provided with this interface for managing an attachment. Now, some of these features will depend on what permissions you have inside of TestRail, and we will cover that now. So when you are viewing the details of an individual file, we've added the following options. You can now change the file name. So if you uploaded a file with a log file with a random name, you can now just go in and make a change to that to replace it with a more user-friendly name. Same thing with copied images and screenshots. So it allows you just to change that to something more user-friendly if you need to. You can also replace the file. So if you uploaded a screenshot, realize it's the wrong one, you can actually open that image and replace it. In order to replace the file, you do need to have delete permission for attachments, because you are deleting the previous attachment and replacing it with a new file. So you do need to have delete permission to replace any existing attachment. We've also provided some metadata information, the file type, the size, the date it was uploaded, and the URL to that item inside of TestRail. For images, we've added a full screen option to expand the image to its original size. You can download non-images, so text files, log files, reports, etc. And you can also change the projects which the file is used in. So this option allows you to share a file between multiple projects, enabling you to still use the same file across many projects. So if you have many projects with the same shared image or expected screen, you can use that file multiple times without needing to re-upload it in every project. And then there's also the option to delete the file from TestRail, which will also require some delete permissions. When you click on any attachment, this is the dialog that I've been discussing. So this shows you a preview of the image with the option to show it in full resolution, along with the editable name, the URL, the metadata, and also the accessible projects shown, plus the delete and replace options. So the delete and replace buttons do require delete permissions for attachments, otherwise you may get an error or the button may not appear. If you'd like to rename a file, you just click on the edit icon next to the name of the file, change the name, and press done. So it's very straightforward interface for just changing your file name. To change the projects which your attachment is accessible in, all you have to do is click on this field, and you can choose any TestRail project that you have and add that to the accessibility list. So this allows you to make attachments available in any project or only a certain set of projects, depending on your privacy needs or security needs. And also replacing a file. So when you replace a file, it does exactly what the name says. It will replace every instance that uses this file with a new version. So if I change this image to something else, everywhere that that attachment is used, that image will be different going forward. So for this reason, it does require delete permission to actually do this. And the warning, the confirmation dialog here just does ask for confirmation that this is the intended behavior. So you're not just replacing the file in that test case, you're replacing the file on the file system itself. So there are different options now for deleting and removing files. You can delete files permanently from TestRail, and you can remove them from your attachments or from your test cases. So there are two different methods here. So first, let's talk about removing attachments. So if you are in a test case or other entity that has attachments associated with it, if you long press on any attachment, it will open the option to delete those attachments. This delete option inside the test case will remove them from the test case itself, not from TestRail. All file deletion is done through either the file screen or the media libraries that are available. So here, this is the attachments pane from a test case where we would just select one or more attachments and remove them from the test case itself. Deleting attachments is done, as I mentioned, through the attachment detail screen. So if you have, if you're viewing a full files information, press the delete button and that will allow you to delete the file from the file system. And this will affect any projects that use this attachment. So the file will be permanently deleted from the file system. So this should be done with care. So we always recommend, managing your user permissions to ensure certain users do not delete files that they do not need to delete. If the file is used in a project for which you do not have access to, you may not be able to delete the file at all because it would affect projects which you don't have access to. You may not have insight into that, where that file is used if you're not an administrator. But so you would get a denial on your deletion request if that file is used somewhere where you shouldn't be able to delete it. So as I mentioned, there's an attachment removal process and attachment deletion process. So when an attachment is removed from a test case, result, or other entity, the attachment will remain on the file system. So this will prevent accidentally deleting the attachments used by many cases. But unwanted files can be deleted through the various attachment management consoles. So the dialog for an individual attachment, which we just viewed, the media library for attachments available in a project. So if you select a file, the delete icon will be available. And then the files library available for administrators. And we will get into the files library in just a moment. So for TestRail administrators, we have added a files library in the administration area. This allows administrators to see every attachment in the instance and any of those file details, modify those files, delete them, or do any other actions they need to do. So in this files library, we have a variety of options. So similar to the media library inside an individual project, administrators will be able to view all the files and manage them. But the difference being here is that they'll see all projects and all attachments. They can open individual files and change properties, delete files, add more files, search for these files, and also sort through the list of files. We've also added a couple of additional filter options. So the filter options that are available inside a project, we've also added a project filter as well. So you can sort down filters or sort down your attachments for your individual projects. We've also added an orphaned attachments filter. This filter is used to identify which files are not attached to an entity. So if you have files attached to test cases, or files which are not attached to test cases. So when you delete TestRail test cases, results, runs, etc., those files are still left behind. So you may want administrators, it would be good practice to go through and clean up files over time that are no longer needed. Um, but the orphaned attachments filter will help you identify files which may not be in use by any test cases or runs or other entity. However, it is important to note that if you have links to files using Markdown, this filter will not identify those files. Markdown links are used inside of text fields with the previous functionality for attachments. Going forward, the Markdown links are not needed. They're still available, but they're not needed. But previous files that are linked inside of text fields or other areas may not be picked up by this orphaned attachments filter because of the Markdown links. So it's just a good practice just to be cautious when deleting any file. It just needs to be called out that the Markdown links are not scanned, as this requires scanning every single text field in every entity inside of TestRail to be able to find those files. So here is an example of the files library. So in the administration area under data management, we have an attachments tab. So this allows you to add files, as I mentioned, delete, remove, and sort through all of your attachments. The orphaned, here I just have an example of an orphaned filter attachment. This just shows files which are not associated directly with any test case, result, project, etc. You can also add additional items to filter by orphaned attachments inside of only certain projects, etc. So you can run multiple filters at the same time if you need to. With this release, we've also made a couple of other changes, which I would like to note. First, we've changed some API behaviors. This was announced in our forums. Attachment IDs are now strings instead of integers. This should not affect much of anything from a user standpoint. API scripts may need to be updated slightly to change a string, an integer to a string, but that's probably a very rare use case considering how some of the coding works for parsing out attachment IDs anyway. And then we've made a couple of other bug fixes. So the get attachments for run endpoint will now properly return attachments based on plan entries. Get attachments for plan entries is updated to properly return the correct attachment IDs. And also there was a bug where using add attachment to run did not properly associate attachments with runs inside the user interface. So that bug has been fixed as well. For TestRail server, we have made some significant changes to support the new attachment structures. We've added a Cassandra database that goes alongside with either a MySQL or SQL Server database, which is already used. So TestRail will now use two separate databases going forward. So if you are using TestRail server and you are interested in upgrading to 7.1 once it becomes available, please keep this in mind. So we would recommend definitely making a backup of your TestRail instance and reviewing our installation requirements before you do begin working on the upgrade. Docker images will also be updated to support this extra database. So TestRail server, we are looking at a release of May, the second weekend of May, so approximately May 14th for TestRail server. We are still working on deploying this fully out to all of our cloud customers. So TestRail server release will come after that the full cloud deployment is done. We're also working to make sure that the server release is is as bug-free as possible before releasing the installation files. So if you are a server customer, please bear with us. We are still working on getting that download available. We're just going through additional testing and ensuring that that we have it fully ready to be released. We have also previously mentioned the API beta period. So there's an API beta header used for bulk GET requests with new data structures returned by some of those bulk API response or API requests. This beta period is now scheduled to end in mid-May, right around the time that server release is available. This is due to an external dependency which we've identified. We're allowing an external tool to make their necessary updates before we release this change, because this would break an integration with an external tool. So that's the reason, but hopefully at this point, anyone already using the API should be using these beta headers. And once this switch is made, the header will simply be ignored, so you will not need to go back in and then remove the header from your API scripts. The header will just be ignored. So there won't be any change necessary going forward, but we do hope you're already using the beta header. So now I'd like to cover some questions that any customers have answered. I believe I've covered the bulk of the functionality that's available now in 7.1, which is an attachments-focused release. I do have a couple of common questions that people may ask already. So if I replace a file linked to other projects, will it replace that file in those other projects too? Yes. So this replaces the file in the file system. So any entities using this attachment will have the new file. Are there any changes to attachment permissions? The simple answer here is no. Existing attachment permissions will impact who can add, edit, and delete files. It should be noted that users will not be able to delete attachments if they're associated with other projects where they don't have the necessary permissions. And how do you remove an attachment from a test case without deleting it? So long clicking on the attachment in the test case will enable the option to remove attachments from either the field or the attachments interface. And you can select as many files as you want and remove them all at once. And you do not need to delete them one at a time or remove them one at a time.